All right, let's jump right in. Today we're diving deep into building a fortress, but not the kind with walls and towers.
Right.
We're talking about ADP 337, the Army's battle plan for protection. And trust me, knowing this doctrine is like having the cheat codes to resilience out in the field.
Absolutely. ADP 337, it's all about making sure our forces, no matter what they face, can hold their ground, keep that combat power up. It's what makes the difference between getting knocked down and weathering any storm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why is this so crucial for you? Think of it this way. Every mission, it has risks, right?
Yeah.
This doctrine, it's like having a toolbox. It helps you see those risks before they see you. Figure out how to, like, dance around them, minimize them, even use them to your advantage.
That's a great way to put it, and that's where risk management comes in. It's right there at the start of the doctrine, the foundation of this fortress we're talking about.
Okay, so let's break down this foundation.
Mhm.
I always picture risk management like, when you're playing chess and you're about to make a move. It's like that internal dialogue. You're sizing up the board, thinking what your opponent might do, figuring out how to protect your pieces. Right.
That is a perfect analogy. ADP 337, it breaks down risk management into a clear process. First, you identify, then you assess, then you respond. Every single action, every decision has some level of risk, and it's about picking the path that gives you the best chance of success while keeping your team and the mission safe.
It's all about weighing those risks because sometimes you got to take a calculated risk to achieve the objective.
Exactly. That's where those four responses come in: avoid, eliminate, mitigate, or accept.
Okay, let's say you're planning a patrol route, right?
Yeah.
Through a hot zone. You spot this narrow pass prime ambush spot. Now, avoiding that risk could mean taking the longer way around. But what if you absolutely have to go through that pass?
Right. Then you're looking at either eliminating or mitigating that risk. So eliminating, that could mean sending a team ahead to clear the pass, make sure it's secure for the main group. Mitigating, that might mean using smoke to cover your movement, make it tougher for the enemy to target you.
So you're already setting up those defenses even before you step off. You're not waiting for the threat, you're anticipating it.
Exactly. And that's where that risk matrix comes in, figure A1 in the document. It's like a cheat sheet for leaders in the field. You've got the severity of what could happen on one side and how likely it is to happen on the other. Helps leaders quickly see the risk of different options and make the best call under pressure.
It's amazing how something so simple can be such a powerful tool, especially when things get intense.
Absolutely. And here's something crucial, might surprise some folks. Risk management, it's not just something the higher ups do. It starts with every single soldier. You are the eyes and ears out there.
You're saying that even if a soldier spots something that seems small, it could impact the whole mission's risk assessment.
Exactly. You report those observations even if they seem small, and it allows the leaders to update their assessments in real time, change the plan if they have to. It's all about staying aware, being proactive at every level.
Got it. So we've got the foundation with risk management, but how does ADP 337 take this and actually turn it into those layers of defense we keep talking about?
It gets into the specifics with what it calls protection tasks, and it covers a lot. We're talking survivability, which is more than just being tough. It's about making your unit a hard target.
So we're not just talking about dodging bullets, we're making those bullets miss in the first place.
Exactly. Hardening vehicles, fighting positions, using camouflage effectively, all of that.
Like in those war movies, when they're meticulously camouflaging everything, always seem like a small thing, but this doctrine really highlights how crucial those details can be for survivability.
Think about it. A well-camouflaged vehicle, way less likely to get hit by enemy fire or spotted by a drone. Minimize your visual and electronic signature, you become a ghost.
So survivability is about making yourself a tough target. But what about the threats you can't just disappear from, like air attacks, or even scarier, CBRN threats?
That's where ADP 337's comprehensive approach comes in. It tackles those specific threats head-on, gives you step-by-step guidance on how to prepare for them, how to mitigate them, and how to respond effectively. Let's take air and missile defense, for example.
Right, because in today's battlefield, that threat from above is everywhere.
Exactly. ADP 337 stresses a layered approach to air and missile defense, the right mix of active and passive defense measures to counter those threats.
So when we say active defense, we're talking about those surface-to-air missile systems, the ones taking down enemy aircraft in the movies.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that those systems are just one part of the equation. ADP 337 really stresses the importance of passive air defense, things you can do to make yourself less vulnerable without firing a shot.
So that's where camouflage, concealment, dispersion, those survivability tactics we talked about come back into play.
You got it. Even something as basic as using the terrain to your advantage, making it tougher for enemy aircraft to get a clear shot, significantly increases your chances of survival. Every layer of defense, whether it's active or passive, makes you more resilient and makes it that much harder for the enemy to win.
Right, so we've got the more conventional threats covered. But what about CBRN, those silent, invisible dangers? How does ADP 337 prepare us for those environments?
CBRN warfare. It adds a whole other level of complexity to the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
And that's why ADP 337 spends a good amount of time laying out a framework for dealing with these threats.
It's more than just having your protective mask ready.
Right, absolutely. It starts with really understanding what the potential CBRN hazards are in your area of operations, using your knowledge of the terrain, the enemy's capabilities, all of that.
So even just identifying a potential CBRN hazard, something like an industrial site, that could be crucial for protecting your soldiers.
Exactly. It's about thinking ahead, anticipating those hazards, taking steps to minimize the risk. Once you've identified the hazards, it's about putting the right protective measures in place. Proper equipment, knowing how to use it effectively, decontamination procedures, knowing the signs and symptoms of CBRN exposure.
And if a CBRN attack does happen, you have to react fast.
Exactly. Minimizing casualties, containing the contamination, getting your unit back up to fighting strength ASAP, that becomes paramount. Knowing your drills, trusting your training, acting calmly under pressure, it's everything.
Right. Moving into the digital age a bit, ADP 337 also talks about electromagnetic protection. Now, this might not seem as immediate as some of these other threats, but with our dependence on technology.
It's more critical now than ever before. We're not just talking about protecting your radios from being jammed anymore. It's about making sure you can use the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which we rely on for everything. GPS, drones.
It's funny you should say that because we take those things for granted, right? We assume our GPS will work, that comms will be up. This document really highlights how vulnerable those systems are.
Absolutely. And that's why electromagnetic protection is so vital. On the one hand, it's about protecting your own access, making sure your systems are hardened against jamming and interference. But it's also about knowing how to deny the enemy access to that same spectrum.
So we're talking about electronic warfare.
Exactly. Using our electronic warfare systems to disrupt enemy communications, jam their radars, basically blind them on the battlefield.
And that can involve some surprisingly simple things, right?
Absolutely. Ensuring your equipment is properly grounded, that alone can significantly reduce your electromagnetic signature, making you much harder to detect or target.
It's like the old saying, loose lips sink ships, but in this case, it's more like loose connections compromise missions. Who knew something so small could make such a difference in operational security? And speaking of operational security, area security, it's a huge part of ADP 337. It's like setting up a fortress within a fortress, right?
Perfect analogy. Area security is all about layers, making it as tough as possible to get to the target. It's not just about stopping them completely, it's also about slowing them down, detecting them early, and then having a plan to respond effectively.
It's about buying time for those response forces to get in position and neutralize the threat.
Exactly. First, you deter the enemy, make them reconsider attacking in the first place. If they do attack, you want to know about it early, slow them down, and ultimately defeat them.
And that reminds me of another crucial element of area security and just good soldiering in general, OPSEC, operational security.
Ah, yes.
Protecting those small details that could give the enemy an advantage.
Think of it like a puzzle, right? One piece by itself. Maybe not a big deal, but you put them all together. They get a clear picture of your plans, your strengths, your weaknesses.
Right. Like posting about troop movements or upcoming missions on social media. Sounds obvious, but ADP 337 points out how that kind of information, even if it seems harmless, can be dangerous if the enemy knows how to put the pieces together.
Exactly. You have to be careful about what you share, online and off.
Thinking about what we say, where we say it, and who might be listening.
Right, because these days the enemy is always listening. It's about knowing what you're communicating, even if you don't mean to.
Right. Okay, moving from protecting our physical footprint to the digital battlefield, ADP 337 also gets into cybersecurity. These days, protecting data and networks, it's just as important as defending any physical location.
Oh, absolutely. It's a battlefield without borders, you know? An enemy can launch an attack from anywhere in the world with just a few keystrokes.
And then the damage can be even worse.
Without a doubt. And that's why ADP 337 stresses the importance of safeguarding the data NA. That's the Department of Defense Information Network Army. Think of it as the Army's nervous system. It's the network of computers, servers, all the communication systems that connect everything and everyone.
The backbone of modern military operations. Command and control, intelligence sharing, logistics, all of it flows through the data NA.
Right, and if the enemy gets into that network, they can disrupt those critical functions. They can mess up our communication, maybe even take control of our systems.
That's a scary thought.
That's why cybersecurity is no longer just an IT concern. It's part of protection that every soldier needs to be aware of.
Right. Okay, back to the physical realm. ADP 337 also gets into physical security, those tangible measures that deter threats and protect what's ours. We're talking barriers, fences, checkpoints, those visible signs of security.
Oh.
But it goes deeper than that, right?
Of course. Physical security is about those layers of defense we keep discussing. It's about making it as hard as possible for an adversary to get to their objective. And it's not just about keeping them out entirely, it's also about slowing them down, knowing they're there, and having a plan to respond.
Buying time, right, for the response forces to move in.
Exactly. First, you deter the enemy, make them think twice about attacking. Then, if they do attack, you want to know as soon as possible, delay them as much as possible, and in the end, defeat them.
Got it. So what about anti-terrorism measures? Where does that fit in with ADP 337?
Anti-terrorism is a critical part of force protection, and ADP 337, it emphasizes a proactive approach, a comprehensive approach. It's not just about reacting after an attack, it's about preventing those attacks in the first place.
So being vigilant, knowing your surroundings, reporting anything that seems off.
Exactly. And ADP 337 breaks anti-terrorism down into 5 main principles: assess, detect, warn, defend, and recover.
Like a cycle, a constant process of evaluation, improvement.
You got it. You assess the threat, you detect any signs of a potential attack, you warn anyone who might be impacted, you defend your assets and your people, and you have a plan to recover if an attack does happen.
Okay, switching gears a bit. ADP 337 also covers something that always amazes me, EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. We're talking about the people who deal with some of the most dangerous threats out there.
True heroes, putting their lives at risk every day to protect others from a hidden enemy explosive hazards.
And it's not just about disarming bombs, right? They're crucial for keeping things moving and protecting lives in all kinds of conflicts.
Right. Clearing IEDs in active combat zones, supporting humanitarian efforts after a conflict by getting rid of unexploded ordnance. EOD specialists do incredibly important work. They save lives and keep those operations moving.
And speaking of bringing people home safe, ADP 337 also has a section on personnel recovery that promised to leave no one behind.
Absolutely. It's a core value, and ADP 337 outlines the steps the Army takes to bring home our personnel who become isolated and make sure they come home safe and sound. It covers everything from how to operate when isolated, to managing isolation, to reintegrating back into their units and with their families when they return.
It's about preparing soldiers for the possibility of being isolated, equipping them with the skills to survive if it happens, and providing the support they need to get back to their units, their families when they return.
Yes, and that's important because the effects of being isolated can last a long time, so we need to provide our soldiers with what they need to recover.
Now, this might seem a little unexpected, but ADP 337 also covers police operations, which makes sense when you think about it. Even in a conflict zone, you need some kind of law and order.
It's about stability and security for the local population and for our own forces in that area.
So in a conflict zone, how does ADP 337 guide our approach to police operations?
It focuses on 2 things, law enforcement and policing, and it acknowledges that the balance between those 2 things changes depending on the specific environment you're in. In an active combat zone, the focus is going to be on maintaining order and security. In a more stable place, you'd see more emphasis on traditional law enforcement.
It's about adapting to the context, using the right approach for the situation.
Exactly. Patrolling, investigating, working with local law enforcement, it's all about bringing back that sense of order and security, allowing life to carry on even with a conflict going on.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that can be tough to talk about, but really important: detention operations.
It's a complex and challenging part of modern warfare, and ADP 337, it lays out a clear way to conduct detention operations that lines up with our values and the law.
It makes it very clear that treating detainees humanely, it's not just the right thing to do morally, it's also crucial for success.
For sure, mistreating detainees. It goes against everything we stand for as an army, but it can also backfire strategically. alienate local populations, fuel the enemy's propaganda, even hurt our mission.
It outlines those different categories of detainees, the legal requirements for handling them, and that need to make sure they're treated humanely, always.
It emphasizes that every detainee, regardless of what they're accused of, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that even when things are challenging, our values and the law still apply. Okay, let's move on to another crucial piece. ADP 337 also covers populace and resource control. We're talking about those interactions with locals, which can make or break a mission.
Right, because in many conflicts, it's just as important to win the peace as it is to win the battles, and that means understanding and working with the people who live there.
Building that trust, listening to their concerns, showing them that we're there to help, not to cause more problems.
Populace and resource control are about finding that balance our security needs and the needs of the people. We need to operate freely and secure what we need, but we also need to do it in a way that minimizes disruption to their lives, that respects their customs and beliefs.
Every interaction, every action has an impact.
Absolutely. One good interaction with a local can do so much for building trust, but one bad one can destroy that trust and make things worse.
Okay, lastly, ADP 337 wraps up on a positive note: force health protection. It's a good point. Protecting our force isn't just about physical safety, it's about their well-being, too.
Exactly. A healthy force is a ready force. It's about understanding that each soldier is valuable, and it's our job to protect that.
So we're talking about preventative medicine, hygiene, vaccines, good health care.
That and more. It's about creating a culture of health in our units. Soldiers need to be able to take charge of their health.
And so much of that comes down to personal responsibility, right? Making healthy choices, staying hydrated, getting enough sleep.
Exactly. And leaders, they play a big role in setting the example and fostering that culture in their units, creating an environment where soldiers feel okay talking about their health and where they know they'll get the support they need to stay healthy and ready for anything.
Because a soldier's most important weapon is their health.
Right.
Without it, nothing else works.
And that's really what ADP 337 is all about. It's about building a force that is more resilient, more lethal, more effective.
It really drives home how much goes into keeping our soldiers safe and mission ready, from the individual level all the way up to the big picture.
Absolutely. And that's where ADP 337 really shines. It ties everything together, shows how all these different pieces fit into that larger strategy of protection.
So it's not just a checklist, it's a way of thinking, a way of operating.
Exactly. It's about weaving protection into everything we do, making it second nature.
And that brings us back to that human element we talked about earlier, the individual soldier, the leader on the ground. They're the ones who ultimately put these principles into action.
Absolutely. You can have the best equipment, the most advanced technology in the world, but without that human element, without that understanding of the why behind it all, it's not going to be as effective.
So how do we make sure those soldiers, those leaders, really internalize this mindset of protection, this proactive approach?
Training, for one. Realistic training scenarios that force soldiers to think on their feet, to apply these principles under pressure. And it's not just about going through the motions, it's about instilling that understanding that every decision they make, every action they take, has an impact on their own safety and the safety of their team.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Bringing everyone home safe.
Exactly.
It's about making protection a reflex, something they don't even have to think about.
Exactly. And that's where leadership comes in. Leaders, they set the tone. They create that culture of awareness, of responsibility.
They lead by example.
100%. They show their soldiers that protection isn't just something you check off a list. It's about taking care of each other, making sure everyone gets home safe.
It's ingrained in everything we do as soldiers, right?
Absolutely. Because in the end, that's the mission, bringing everyone home.
Well said. ADP 337, it's a powerful document. It's given us a lot to think about today.
It really has. It's a vital roadmap for any soldier, any leader who wants to make protection more than just a concept, but a way of life in the Army.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Ah!
Thanks for diving deep with us today. This is a conversation we need to keep having. To all the soldiers out there, stay vigilant, stay safe, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.